There are three people who are the exact same person. I'm going to explain this riddle in this video. Who are these three people who are the exact same person? Your pro-black Afrocentric, your Negro pastor, and your white liberal. Now I know the riddle can be a little confusing when I explain it, but you'll get it. If you have critical thinking skills, you're going to figure this out. How are all three of these guys the same person? Because they all talk the same, they all walk the same, and they all follow the same narrative regarding the Negro. Why am I saying this? Because if you listen to their words and you listen to the words between the lines of what they're saying, they're all saying the same thing. Your black pastor, your pro black Afrocentric, and your white liberal are all saying that the Negro is a poor, miserable, downtrodden person who, without their help and without their agenda, will not be able to pick himself up. All three of these guys all have the exact same phrases. They all use the exact same buzzwords, and they all have the exact same platform for exploiting the Negro community. And the reason why I just figured it out, last night, just doing some critical thinking, and that's how I can come to this conclusion because they're all three are the same. They all three, they all eat from the trough of the same white supremacist they complain about and they make all these rants about, but they all eat from his same trough. And they all get their money from the same exact white supremacists who fund, your grants, your in-kind donations, and your government block grants. They all get their money from the same platform. And what most Negroes don't understand is that all three of these guys are the exact same person, and all three of them do not have any interest in building a black community or helping black people achieve a solid patriarchal middle class. The only thing that all three of these individuals want to do is make money on the misery of the Negro. Now, I went into this in depth in my Grant Money Hustle video where I talk about how the nonprofit operates and how they use their tax-free 501c3 status to exploit the Negro community. And, they talk this game about how, they're going to help these poor people achieve, employment, job training, make themselves to the middle class. And this is all a scam. As long as the grant money flows, they'll make sure that maybe one or two, they have one or two success stories they can, tout out so they could continue to get the grant. They'll print up, a nice little story about one or two of these downtrodden Negroes that were elevated through their program, but they really don't have an interest in helping black people, work on their own to build their own businesses and stuff. They don't really want, a competing black infrastructure made by black businessmen like myself. What they really want is a codependent infrastructure where, they continue to make money on the heads of these Negroes. See, with every job training program or, community center, all these people get, 1,500, 2,000 a head. And all of these guys make their money this way. Even your Afrocentric Negro, he also makes money through educational programs. All of this money, is made. Because I had a family member, they were telling me about, how the Department of Education here in New York just instituted dance. And those people are independent contractors, just like your pro-black Afrocentrics, your Negro pastors, and your white liberals. They're independent contractors who got a grant, to do these type of programs. These contracts come through grants, and this is the part of the grant money hustle. It's not about teaching the kids to dance. It's just about giving out money through a grant. And this is how people make their money on the Negro. And the Negro just sits there and thinks, oh, I'm getting cultured, I'm getting educated. You're not getting educated, you're getting conned. The whole thing is that, Negro could have everything in his own community if he just took a little, money, saved it up, and invested. It doesn't take that much money to start a business. But, the Negro gets $5,000 a month not 5,000 a month, but $5,000 in income tax refunds, for all the kids that they have. Some of them get $2,000. At one time, I'm a single individual. I got about, one time when I was working, I got $1,000 back, and I used that to continue with my publishing efforts. But this is money you could have used, to help start a business or to help invest. But most Negroes take that money and they blow that money. And I look at this Negro. He doesn't see that all three of these guys have the same agenda and that all three follow the same narrative. And that narrative, it tells the same story about this Negro, that he's poor, that he's miserable, that he needs to be picked up and cleaned up, and he needs to be saved. And all three make their money by keeping him miserable. The whole thing is that, you know, everybody's saying that they want to save this Negro when really they just want to save him so they can exploit him. And I came to this epiphany, last night just sitting thinking, and I said to myself, all three of these guys are the same. And what they want is everybody to follow their narrative. They want everybody to think that the Negro is a victim. They want to keep the Negro in that victim position, and they want to continue to further this victim agenda. They have no interest in true group economics. They have no interest in, supporting black business. They have no interest in building a strong black community. These clowns, all three of them, are only interested in grant money, their little hustles, and exploiting black people by, using these buzzwords and race baiting and excuse mongering. It's the same, game on a different day. And sadly, because most Negroes don't have any critical thinking skills, they can't see that all three are the same. And they can't see that, your community is being conned left, right, and up, and even down, because all three of these guys are the exact same guy. They may have different colors, they may wear different suits, they may wear, made in Taiwan dashikis, or, pump their fists, but they're the exact same guy with the exact same con. They're two sides of a three-sided coin. And if you can understand the riddle, you understand what I'm talking about. And if you have critical thinking skills, you can understand how I'm saying that all three of these guys are the same hustle, and they're all the same con, and they all paint the black people as victims. Um, and seeing a black person as a victim, they think the victim is a position of power, but really it's a position of weakness for black people. And the Negro doesn't understand that, what I understand from my own personal experience, that when you're a victim, it's a position of weakness, and when you are weak, people will take advantage of you and they will exploit you. And this is what happens to the Negro time and time again, because he doesn't take the time to really examine, who is around him, because he's so desperate for help that he doesn't think to ask a question of the people who are helping him. I kind of went into this in the Misadventures of Captain Save-A-Ho ebook, because I talk about how the Captain Save-Ems, all they think about is they just want a woman, and they don't think about, what type of terms they're agreeing to, and then they wonder, why they wound up in this nightmare 6 months to a year later. And the whole thing is that if they had taken the time, to examine this woman and, her situation, they would have avoided her, because the whole thing is if they had just taken the rejection, of the regular women, they'd have been able to move ahead. And this is the same thing with the Negro. If he had taken the time, to examine these people and, take that long, hard look at these people, he'd be able to see the truth about them, and he would avoid them at all costs, because he would understand that these are all predators and they're looking to exploit him, and get what they want through him. They're using him to get this government grant money, these corporate grants, even, GoFundMe's and stuff. And they want to make their money, and they want black people to live on their terms. And, they don't want black people to live on their own terms, because in their eyes, with the liberal, he truly is, he insults the Negro and he doesn't leave a mark. He'll slap you in the face and won't leave a mark. Like here in New York, not governor, Mayor Bill de Blasio, who said, kids would be safer in school than they would be at home. And he made that statement for a reason. He was basically slapping all of these parents in the face, and they didn't even understand how he was slapping them because he wanted to keep the schools open until 7:30. And what he wanted to do, what he said when he said this, when he said that kids would be safer in school and then in the home, that was basically a slap in people's face. But many people just didn't have the critical thinking skills to understand that they were being pimp slapped and being told that they're incompetent parents and that, Mr. Bill de Blasio, knows better than the parent in caring for their children. This is what they didn't see. They didn't, because they couldn't read between the lines. Because reading between the lines, again, requires critical thinking skills. It requires you to deconstruct information and deconstruct facts. And the Negro, for the most part, he can't do that. He takes everything at face value, and he doesn't understand, how people are taking advantage of him and exploiting him at every turn. And because two of the three people are black, he really can't see it because he thinks everybody black is just like him, just as good as him. But in reality, they're even worse than him. They're the same, jive time predators, like your dope dealers, like your thug. It's just another flip side another flip side of the coin. But these guys know how to talk and walk, and they know how to shout slogans, and they know how to tout these signs and promote an agenda. But in actuality, they're all speaking the same narrative. These two same guys, the Negro pastor and your pro-black Afrocentric, they're both promoting the same narrative and talking the same narrative as your white liberal, and they both have the same paternalistic, patronizing view of the Negro as your white liberal. Because if you really look at all three of them, they have a view that, without me, it's really narcissistic. Without me, the Negro will never be able to achieve his potential. Now, this has been deconstructed and refuted numerous times throughout history. That, even after slavery, we look at Reconstruction. The Negro, with his family intact, did not need the assistance of anyone. At this time, Reconstruction, the Negro, for the most part, had built up his own towns, he had built up his own businesses, and there were Negroes in the South, and they were in Congress. Some of them were judges, and in the North, if we look at the Negro in the free states, we had a very very strong middle class of Negroes. So the Negro really never needed some agenda from an Afrocentric or a Negro pastor. He has always had the skills to build his own infrastructure. Even he even has it right now. But the whole thing is that because he is so codependent on this white liberal and his false agenda, where he talks about how much of a victim a Negro is, he does not make the efforts to go get up and build his own community up. He instead waits for the liberal, the Afrocentric, and the Negro pastor to do the building for him, and then he takes a cut of the money. Because when they do the building and they build the housing and all this stuff, they get a nice cut of these grants because there's something called an operating budget that they use to, funnel the money through. And a lot of people don't understand what an operating budget is because this is something that they use in some charter schools as well. They also use the operating budget to, pay for their, because you'll see these guys in their schools, like charter schools and stuff. The schools will be in these little decrepit places. They'll just have a little minimal stuff. The kids will be eating cornflakes all the time. But this guy has a Lexus or an Infiniti or a Cadillac Escalade. The director of the program. He's driving around in a luxury vehicle and he's making a six-figure salary while his teachers are making $35,000, $40,000 a year. Same thing with your nonprofit and your other program. These guys are driving around in Lexuses. They're wearing Brooks Brothers suits or, custom tailored suits. And they're saying that they have to do this for the image and this is all part of the operating budget. These are all business expenses. And then they take this money, and they give the kids the minimum in resources, and then they pay the teachers, minimum salaries and stuff. And the same thing in the nonprofits too. They also pay the people, $20,000, $25,000 or $30,000, and they come at you with this spin talking about, it's just a sacrifice you're making for the community. But these guys are they're not making any sacrifice. This is the whole hypocrisy of these three con men. And when you deconstruct them the way I have deconstructed them, you start to see the truth regarding their hypocrisy. Without them, you can't be somebody. And without their agenda, you can't be somebody. Now, again, like I said, the Negro before created his own agenda. And he had his own agenda until Jim Crow policies came in. And even then, we had some Negroes, building and doing their own thing with black owned businesses. So the infrastructure was there. The only problem was with the civil rights dysfunction, where we had people getting into this integration mindset. Something Ralph Ellison even talked about in Invisible Man, about how Negroes wanted their serge suits from Barney's and to be able to sit at Woolworth counters. If you read Invisible Man, it will really give you a real insight into the Negro dysfunction, um, and how this Negro, how he thinks. And because these same three individuals who were around now were around then, pushing the same agenda. But the sad part is the Negro, at least the Negro back then, wasn't listening. Today, he's listening, and because he's listening, he's not growing. And if you look at, logically at these three individuals and all the programs, because we've poured, over the last 40 years, several $1 trillion into these guys' programs, into their, school programs, into their job training programs, their job readiness programs. We've poured trillions of dollars into their programs, yet the black community still remains the poorest in the world. And you have to ask yourself, you know, why is that the case? And when you deconstruct it the way I have deconstructed and see, you know, how all three of these guys are the exact same person, you start to understand that again, none of these guys really are interested in building a black community. They're only interested in exploiting the black community because they know that, black people are emotional. And if you push the right buttons in the Negro, he will go along with your agenda because they don't see the Negro as smart. And they figure if I push his buttons, if I use the right buzzwords, if I use the right phrases, if I say racism, white supremacy, they're holding back the black man, or, I'm providing equal opportunity, or this is an opportunity equal opportunity, or this is an opportunity for diversity, because I saw this with comic books. They talked about diversity heroes, but it really wasn't diversity. It was just tokenism. That's another video again. But this is what I saw, time and time again when it comes to this Negro and these opportunists who take advantage of the black community time and time again. There are three of them. They're all three are the same one. They may wear different outfits, but they're the exact same person. And when you start breaking down and breaking through their rhetoric and watching, most importantly, watching their actions, you will see the truth about all three of these Negroes. And this white liberal. You'll see all three. I know I misspoke there, but you'll see the truth about this Negro pastor, this pro-black Afrocentric, and this white liberal. You'll see the truth about all three of them. And you'll see all three are one. They're like the Unholy Trinity. And when you understand that these three are the Unholy Trinity who are exploiting the black community, you will wake up and see the truth about them and start distancing yourself from them and their rhetoric, because all of their rhetoric again is just emotional stuff to keep you from seeing the logic. And when you take it apart, you see that none of them are really serious about true building of a black community. Things like group economics, property ownership, and building revenue streams that create a tax base for a strong black community. Only way you can do this is, again, economic power is political power, and the only way to get economic power is through business. It's not through nonprofits or educational schemes or grant money hustles. grant money hustles are totally different from your business. Your business infrastructure is a completely different model. And what the Negro never understands is that your business infrastructure is about creating profits and generating revenue, whereas your nonprofit revenue stream is about creating funding streams from grants and um, trusts. And because I worked in fund development at Strive 15 years ago, and they taught me all this stuff about grant writing, proposal writing, and this is how I understand it. There's two different revenue streams, and you have to understand how both revenue streams work, because a nonprofit revenue stream is not about building profits and bringing money into the black community. A for-profit revenue stream will build a black community, and it will lead to long-term employment. You have to have a strong long-term plan, and the Negro doesn't understand how he's being exploited. He doesn't understand how this, fits into the big picture, because he's not a visionary. He's very short-sighted. He's very emotional, and I'm trying not to sound patronizing and paternalistic like this liberal. I'm just trying to break the truth down to him. But he doesn't look at things in that big picture, and you really have to start looking at things from a bigger picture and a larger vision, because I'm one of those guys. I see things in broad spectrum. I see things in that panoramic view. And when I look at how the Negro community is being exploited by the Unholy Trinity, um, it really disgusts me. And that's one of the reasons why I made this video, because I want people to understand how money is taken, the 3.3 trillion in cash and credit, how it flows out of the black community. And these three individuals are a big culprit in taking money out of the black community. And they make all of these promises of trying to build a black community, but they really don't want to build anything. Because if you look at their 30-year or 40-year, even let's go back 50 years, we look at how their approaches have worked. Why are people still poor? Why is the black community actually worse than it was in the 1960s, where we had single mothers at 7%? Why did we go from 7% to 72%? Why did we go from unemployment among black men being at one level in the 1960s to this 80%? And how did we go from black women being unemployed at some rate, I had to go back and go through the research, but up to 60-some%? And why is black children's unemployment at 80%? Now, when you break these Negroes down, when you break these three of the Unholy Trinity down, you understand why Negro economy has gone nowhere. And when you understand that they all follow the same narrative and they all tell the same story about the Negro, you understand, that all three of them have no interest in building a black community. They're all jokers, they're all clowns, and they all have more crap coming out of their mouth than their backside. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.